Not a war game, by the way.
So welcome to another war game review. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, you got me all whacked out now.
So welcome to another board game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at Free at Last, The Struggle for Equality from the Dietz Foundation. This game is a 2 to 6 player game. I think there might be a solo mode. I think it said one player
Maybe.
mode, but not sure.
Maybe.
But this is a cooperative...
Or it could be competitive.
Yeah, there's a competitive option, but a cooperative game where you are all different kind of, I don't know what you'd say, like factions,
Organizations or factions.
Working towards like civil rights and equality and all that stuff in America. Now, the Dietz Foundation, if you don't know, is a non-profit organization that publishes board games and things like that. It does that to help fund grants for teachers, and the games themselves are designed to typically be educational from like a sociology or a historical or geographical standpoint, things like that. Mm-hmm. So this falls right in line with a game of theirs that you would the kind of thing that you would expect from them. Something that's almost like a tool to use in the classroom.
Right.
So we've played a few of at least one of their games.
Revolution in Iran
Yes.
was one. We have another one, but we supercharged.
Yeah, Supercharged is a racing game. They also have 3 Years of War as well.
Okay, we haven't
Which
gotten
is
around to those yet.
Yeah, it's a war game. So this was something that's a little bit different from their other game of theirs that we played that was a more traditional CDG war game. We played this 2-player. Again, it can play like up to 6.
I'm not sure I'd recommend it at 2-player.
No.
We talked a lot about that when
Yeah.
we played.
So we played this game, and it was a game that I really wanted to love, but it has some issues with it.
Well, and I'm going to add something to that. I think it's a game that we both wanted to love.
Yes.
We both could feel the thematic part of it.
Yes.
We were interested in that. I think the rules are an unmitigated disaster.
Yes, the rules are not good.
Very unclear, very lacking in detail, lacking in examples or clarity. For instance, we were looking for freedom markers.
Yeah.
And
they
they're
mention
never referenced
when it comes
anywhere.
to like passing legislation markers at the very end of the rule book, passing legislation cards, like it's like, hey, you pass those by spending freedom markers. They don't mention freedom markers at all in the whole rest of the rule book.
Well, I think in the components section, they say you have 120 some odd cubes and
There's
250
there's a
cards.
whole inventory. Freedom markers not listed.
Not
on
listed.
It.
So to me, and I'm not trying to be overly critical.
No.
That's not what I'm trying to do. I paid for this on Kickstarter. I think it was $65. It's a beautiful game, really high quality production.
Yep, components are great.
We don't understand why it has this big board and the way it's laid out. Because looking at it, we thought this might be, I won this. I'm going to put 2 influence cubes in Georgia. No, that's not
here
what it is.
So if you look at the back of the box, you would you'd be mistaken for thinking that it has like an area control element to it.
It doesn't.
The map is purely just a map. It's just for looking at to look nice, and it has the names of all the locations.
Which I understand from a teaching perspective. You're trying to make sure that people or kids or children that are playing this game, where's Greensboro, North Carolina? Oh, it's right there. I know where that is.
That is the only function of the map.
The only well, and the other function is you put the projects in the states.
Put the projects in the states when you deal them.
But Tennessee,
but then you immediately buy them out of those.
Well, and Tennessee, you can't put a project in that state. There's no way.
Yeah, or
It's
you're
too
supposed
small.
to leave them out and just have your marker on it and like complete it on the map. But half the players are upside down from it, so you take them into your play area and do it there. That's what you do.
I just think there's a game screaming here to get out.
Yes, and that was my thing
not
with this.
coming out.
We played this, and mechanically, some of the things that you're doing are so cool.
Yeah.
Like, here's my little project that I'm trying to do. I have these white cubes and these blue cubes that represent both
opposition,
like, individual and systematic opposition to your reforms.
Social resistance and systemic resistance, which is cool. Very cool.
And you're like committing all of these cubes and influence and things to it from like your side and your kind of organization to kind of overcome that so that your project can be successful. And the projects are things like getting like voter registration drives or the Selma marches,
or sit-ins, or
freedom rides,
right?
All the kind of stuff
Things that you've heard of. At least they would have done in the 1960s as a part of the civil rights movement. And that's a project.
And they've got beautiful pictures of those specific, like, and they are like
they're historical.
They're project specific. Like they did a lot of research on those, and they have names on the cards that have corresponding effects, and those are people who were involved in those.
Here's Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife,
yes.
And her card's tied specifically to him, and that's cool. That's great. And there's a lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah, like what you're doing, like committing stuff to those, trying to overcome them, and then you roll some dice, and some get added, some get taken away, and then there's reprisals.
Yep.
Some of the way that stuff works is so cool.
Yeah.
But gleaning that from the rulebook
is a challenge.
Almost impossible. Like, there are pages that are duplicated in the rules, and there's, like, no pictures outside of the first 2 pages.
And I would say this. I went to the Board Game Geek page. There's about 25 questions, I think. I would say 4 or 5 of them have received answers. And to me, that's a little bit of a travesty.
Yeah,
people paid for this game. This just came out about a month ago. I've had it for about 3 weeks. And when you only have 4 or 5 answers to questions, somebody needs to get on there and answer some questions, because the rule book as presented doesn't provide you the information you need to seamlessly. We played it putting things together, doing some interpretation, using our gamer minds. But someone who's not into games...
But some of it was like, we had to go on BGG, and people had the same questions about those freedom markers, and it was like, hey, but it's this other component that's like not referenced and is called something else entirely.
I would say there's a really cool game here. I really honestly do. Because I enjoyed what we were doing.
Yes.
The fact that I was helping you with my cards, that's cool.
And I'm helping
because it's a cooperative style game. And when it's not competitive.
No, but so much more than a lot of other co-ops. A lot of other co-ops is like, my actions do this, and then your actions maybe fill in that hole or do this.
We were directly helping
like,
each other.
I'm giving you things so you can complete. I'm adding to your set. I'm helping you to get an extra reroll. It is very, very cooperative in that sense. And
very well done.
Yeah.
I think that part of it is well constructed. I just think the rest of it that supports that has something lacking.
This game is in such a desperate need of second edition rules.
Yes, already.
That it's like, it's hard to... So if that's on BGG, and
I was looking,
rules,
and there was some, and I didn't download it, but there was a PDF that said something like updated living rules, and I thought about, I'm like, I should have printed that out, but I didn't think we were going to have this trouble.
You wouldn't know that if you had bought this game.
So let's get beyond that, right? We've said our piece on that. I don't want Damon, Ted, or Jim, I think it's Jim Dietz, to think that we hate the game or because there's a lot to like here.
Yes.
I just think it needs some polishing. And I, as a Kickstarter backer, I paid for this a year ago with my own funds. I would expect a little more, frankly.
Yeah.
Now, if they'd given us a review copy, I'd feel a little differently about it. I'd still make some of the same comments, but I paid for this. So one of the comments I want to make about the projects that you're trying to accomplish, you're using your cards really in 2 different ways, and I think it's kind of cool.
Yes.
Your cards are to be played down kind of as a support structure for that project being completed.
Yeah, it's your resources, you're committing to it.
And you can do it in several different ways depending on what type of projects they are. We mainly did A projects, I think.
Yeah, which was like accommodation based.
Right. So you're laying down 2 or 3 white cards or red cards, and I'm getting a certain amount of, what are the red cubes called?
Commitment cubes.
Commitment cubes that I place on there, and then we do the opposition stuff based on what's on the card, and I'm challenging those, right? So we're then using our cards you can help me by buffing those and throwing one of your cards into my line. I get 3 more cubes. I think it was 3 per card or something like that.
Yes.
And then I can use the events on the cards. Some of those events were very, very, very specific, almost to the point of being pigeonholed. That card is completely useless unless the SLCC or whatever it was one of the factions playing.
Yes.
Or the libs are playing. So that's why I made the comment early on, this is probably more of a 4
plus
player game.
And I wholly agree with that sentiment.
3 might be a little different because then I'd have more opportunities to play my cards on your stuff. But what ended up happening, I was doing all this cool stuff, then all of a sudden I drew 4 red cards and 2 blue cards. You weren't doing blue, I wasn't doing blue or red. I had a bunch of cards stuck in my hand.
Yeah, or the events for them. So the other part of that is I was doing an A project and so were you.
Yeah.
A bunch of my cards were all like for V projects.
Yeah.
And the thing with this game is that there is like almost 0 discard mechanics.
Yeah, you can't just say, I'm going to discard 2 or 3 cards at the end of the turn because my hand sucks.
Like, I played the NAACP, who have that as a one-time kind of faction bonus. They can discard some cards and draw some new ones.
Well, and I'm not sure that's one time. Either.
One time per turn.
One time per turn, right. Not one time per game, it's one time per, yeah.
But like, that's
powerful.
One faction out of 6. Right?
But I had a bunch of crap in my hand that I could not get rid of.
And I think you'd seen a card that was like, hey, do this thing and you can discard some cards.
But I couldn't meet the conditions of that to do it.
And so,
which is fine, but give me a mechanic to get rid of 1 card.
At least in a 2-player game.
Yeah, yeah. Put that in for a 2-player game to encourage that, because I would never play this game again 2-player.
No.
Because of that experience.
I also wouldn't.
Yeah.
You'd have to play it so intricately well.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we're never doing the same type of projects. We're never using the same types of cards. And even then, you might still get totally gummed up. You can't do anything based on, card draws and factions that you've chosen. Mm-hmm. But if you do play this 4-player, I'm doing an A project, you're doing an S project, you're doing a V project.
I can put one of my cards on your line. I can put one of my cards on your line.
Yeah, you're doing sequential numbers, you're doing ranks, you're doing colored sets. Like, you can help so much more when there's more people to help.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this game's going to be great. Mm-hmm. You're going to get 4, 5, 6 different students together in a classroom. Someone who knows the game is going to teach it to them without showing them the rulebook. And they're going to work together so well because this game encourages that. It rewards it, the working together to solve all of the different projects.
Yeah.
And that's really enjoyable.
Well,
it's fun to do that.
And that's also very thematic because that's what had to happen. The different black leaders had to come together and help each other. They couldn't just go off on their own. They had to have a coalition and work together and try to deal with things. And
you have to have a united front to defeat what was in front of them.
And because of what they did, it led to the March on Washington and some of the changes. And America has never been the same and is better for that. But I would never play a 2-player.
No.
So what I was doing with those cards, I liked. I felt I was so utterly limited in our 2-player play that it makes me not want to play a 2-player again.
No, and I wouldn't. I really wouldn't either. Because I was having a great time.
Yeah. Because you were completing everything.
Yeah. You had to complete 3 projects in this scenario. I completed all 3 of them.
All 3. I didn't even come close to mine.
Because you were stuck.
Yeah.
Because card draws, and there came a point where I couldn't help you anymore either.
Yeah.
Because my card draws kind of sucked, and so I was like, oh, we'll just kind of like scrape by over here. So I was playing a great game, and you weren't doing as much. And that's not fun to sit and watch either.
And part of that was the leaders. You have leader tokens. You have like, I think you start with 6, and then the NAACP allowed you to get another.
They have another 6 because they were like loaded with.
So you had 12 leaders, and each of them does a different thing. And my leaders were very specific. Mostly V projects was what they were focused on. Mostly being in the state of Georgia. I never saw Georgia because we were playing the first scenario.
Yeah, which has these projects.
So frankly, there were like 4 or 5 of my leaders that were completely useless.
And would you have chosen other ones?
Well, I looked at my other ones. There were 2 others that I would have chosen.
Okay.
But I still would have had, I think, 4 leaders for I was the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. maybe I wouldn't have played that. But you know what? In the rules, it might be a nice thing to say, you know what? These are the two best factions to play when you're doing a two-player game.
Yeah.
Because they work well together and they're, leaders are going to help. Because the leaders are the key. You were able to get rid of those projects because your leaders were providing you things like +2 red cubes.
Yes.
Allowing you to build up a good reserve.
Or roll the red
2
dice
dice.
Twice. Yeah.
You had several of those leaders. I had nothing like that. And I actually had one like it, but it had to be for V projects, which is fine. But those leaders are key. And I really like that because you use them like a resource. You use them, they get tired after they've been used. And even some of them can get killed when the white rolls a K.
The first project, one of my leaders died, which is the most me thing to have happened.
It happens a lot with you.
Like my leaders, regardless of whatever game it is, they always don't make it.
Kick it.
Yeah.
But that's another example of, I think, a very cool addition to the system that's based on a historical element that makes the game better. It just, maybe there should have been direction. For a 2-player scenario, play these 2 factions.
Yeah. Well, and
do not play the SNCC because you have no V projects in the first. You had 1. But it was also very hard.
But like you had to draw it.
Yeah.
If you didn't draw it,
we didn't draw it.
And you're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I can't not do one.
And I couldn't take another project because I couldn't finish the one I was getting, and you didn't want to fail because, my goodness,
you
that
start getting penalized.
really
not
racked it up. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think that also, it shows 2 things. One is that there is some extremely cool strategy and decision making in this game.
Oh, yeah.
How you choose your leaders, which factions you're playing with, and even like which projects you're willing to kind of take a chance on. But that shows up much better in a 4 or 5 player game. You're going to have more projects to choose from. You're going to have more factions out. You're going to have more leaders out. And so you can be like, hey, half my leaders are in reserve or retired, so I can't really help with any of this stuff. So I'm more tailored to this one over here. And then you're like, cool, well, I'm a bit better at this thing. I've got some Georgia leaders. I'll take the Georgia one. And I think you get more of that of like, what can we throw our weight behind?
Yeah.
Which also feels like a great theme of like an organization's picking and choosing
You're
their
good at
battles.
this. You're going to do this.
You get more of that in a broader game.
I was better in sit-ins, freedom rides, and there was one other. I didn't see any of those, right? There were literally none of those in the first scenario. And that's okay, but go to that little extra effort in the rule book.
Yeah.
Clean it up. And say,
2 players,
please don't use the SNCC because they do not have leaders that are going to benefit
this is hard mode.
Yeah, right. Do it, but to understand it's going to be difficult. Speaking of hard mode, the one thing I did like was the challenge cards.
Yeah, and we played with them because I'm like, screw it, we'll put them in. It doesn't add a lot of rules complexity.
They sucked. I mean, they were bad things.
In a good way.
But that's cool because it made it more challenging. Or it made us think about how am I going to get rid of that? Because sometimes some of your cards would say, do this to get rid of a challenge card. Because these kind of stay out and continue, and my goodness.
Yeah, or they like...
bad.
So there was a Confederate Veterans Day parade, and it adds 3 white cubes to a march project.
Yeah.
But you don't get rid of it until a march project has been completed.
Accomplished.
So it's one of those things that doesn't trigger until marches start going on and there's kind of counter marches.
Yeah.
And so when that march project comes out, it's like, it's like a little bit harder. And you pull 2 of those every turn.
Yeah.
And it
was rough.
They're great flavor and additional difficulty if you're good at the game.
And isn't that what you want from a good cooperative game?
Yes.
You don't want it to be a cakewalk.
No.
We played an earlier cooperative game today, and we added some of the more challenging parts because we wanted it to be a challenge.
Yes.
That was a good part of the game.
Yes.
Really enjoyed that. The legislation, I think, is also unique and interesting. I don't understand that yet. It just didn't work out for us.
Yeah, the problem with the legislation is that the rules in the rulebook were not good for it.
Yeah.
Like, that was the whole thing where you purchase it with freedom points, which, like, aren't listed anywhere else in the rules.
Where's the freedom markers?
And then there's
We had
also,
no
like,
idea.
this, like, mini-game for the Libs coalition, which you only play... That's the 6th player faction that you only play in a 6-player game, and they like do this whole other thing so that I don't know if that's fun for them playing their own little game whilst the rest of us are doing this.
Yeah, it's probably different, but that may be another thing, right? That they caution in the rules. Hey, that 6th player is going to be playing an interesting and different game.
Yeah.
Don't use
But
that unless you would be interested in
you're playing
in
this
that.
at 4 or 5 players, and maybe with those new living rules, you're probably going to have a
Yeah.
good time. I haven't read those new living rules. I probably should and
should've
might let
printed
you
them
know,
out.
but
Well,
without them,
I blame
you have a hard
myself
time.
because I should have looked at that a little closer, and I would have printed it out, and we might not have had the problems that we had.
Whilst that's true,
And we're smart dudes.
every game,
I think we are.
Every game has living rules on BGG, but like you don't need them for every game.
No, you don't.
Like we could kill 1,000 trees printing the living rules for all these games.
Sure.
But half of them don't need it. This one needs it.
This one did. I was also, and I'll say it again, I'm just not so sure what the board was for. It's kind of disappointing.
When you brought it over, I was like, oh, this is like Corrupt Bargain, or oh, this is like
well, once again, I thought,
Bleeding Kansas.
I completed a project in Georgia. I'm going to get 3 cubes there.
Yeah,
then you completed one there, you get 2 white. And it's just like, it's not what it was.
That's what it looks like it's for.
But I didn't read enough.
You absolutely don't do anything with it.
Yeah, so that's my bad. The other thing I would say, in the competitive mode, which we did not play.
No.
There are things for, sometimes the cards say like collect a blue cube from every whatever type of card or from your project, and you're going to collect those and you're going to use your markers. You've got like 6 of them.
Yeah.
And you're going to move up I collected 4 blue cubes that turn, and that's going to give you a certain amount of VP, I think, as long as you have more than the other people. So that's another kind of mini game in the game, right? You might be playing those to try to score some extra points.
And you might, if you do fundraisers for people, you get points from that.
Yep.
But then other people might turn them down.
Yeah.
So you don't get any points if you're winning too much. And so the competitive side of it is, it's still cooperative, but it's what's called your impact.
Yeah, your impact,
How much were you a part of this movement? So that's the competitive aspect of it.
So we didn't play that, but we were kind of discussing it as we were playing. The only other thing I want to comment about is once again, what are these called? Commitment cubes. The commitment cubes, if you're doing the campaign game, and I talked to you, I'd like to try the campaign game but I'd like to try it with 4 players.
Yes, and
I don't want to do it with 2 players. But the campaign game requires you to track all the commitment cards that you win from your completed projects. And the way you win the game, I believe, is you actually fill up every one of these spaces.
Yes, which is almost all the commitment cubes, and that's the March on Washington, basically.
There 53 of these, and it was like you had 58 in or
something
something like that. It was like a difference of 8 or 10.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that. One of your advantages is placing a ton of cubes on your card, so when they do their reprisals, you still have more cubes than they do. And the fewer cubes you have to do that, because you're putting them on this, and you're playing 4 or 5 players, that's going to make that more and more challenging. We talked about that. It would really make it hard to complete some of the projects.
The later the game goes on, the harder that's going to be.
Because there's not the resources you need.
They're going to be much closer. You can't have a landslide over things. And so then you might say, well, maybe I don't want to have a landslide on this card.
Right.
So I'm just trying to complete this project well enough, but not exceed it by like 10, because then that's 10 cubes gone.
Yeah.
But I can't, especially if it was like a smaller one, because then you've got the projects which have start with 10 opposition.
Right.
But you're you need the 15, 20 cubes for that.
And the reason you
overcome
need more commitment cubes than the opposition cubes is because what's going to happen is you're going to do reprisals.
Yeah, you remove some of theirs.
Yeah. And then they're going to roll some dice.
Well, then however many cubes they've got, they remove that many of yours. And it's like, oh.
So if you only remove 2 or 3 cubes and there's still 5 of theirs left, you're going to lose 5 red cubes. Now, those 5 red cubes go back to the supply, but if you only had 5, you've all of a sudden failed the project, and you're going to start...
And that's a losing condition.
Yeah.
You start losing those.
Systemic resistance is really going to go up.
Or even if you have fewer than the seg cubes that are left,
yeah,
the social resistance goes up, and you're like, oh, no.
Yeah, it's just... So that's another question I would have for that. I saw on BGG someone asked, are these all the cubes that are in the game? I didn't see an answer to that question. There was no answer from the design team.
Can you just get more from my red cube box?
Can you get 5 red cubes? And there was no answer.
And I don't think I saw an answer in here for that either.
Anyway, I think we can dwell on it. One other thing I wanted to cover, I wanted to show a project card. maybe you can show it because I can't read these anymore. I didn't take my
Sure.
glasses on. But just show them what a project card is.
That's what a project card looks like. So you got your name at the top. There's a little, the state that it's in. And then it has like a person listed on it. And if you meet
Associated with
those
that.
requirements, it's kind of like their effect. And then at the bottom, you have either 1, 2, or 3 stages that you have to get through to complete it, and the corresponding opposition in white cubes and blue cubes for each of those stages.
So some of these are really tough. This one, Washington Parish voter registration.
Yeah.
That's got 3 different stages. That's a tough card to complete.
Yes.
It's a V project. So for me, V projects were a little easier to complete. I had some leaders that would have given me more dice and given me more cubes. But that one is still challenging.
Challenging, but it's
not as hard as this one.
Yeah, this one has a nice little bonus with the summer project volunteers if you can get it to go.
Which those bonuses are really key. It's typically rolling 2 dice, taking the highest or the lowest, depending on. And we found that those were indispensable. If you didn't have those,
if you've got
you
a
were going to be
project,
struggling.
You're choosing projects of like, can I complete some of these bonuses?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, you're like, oh, it's going to be so difficult.
And here's just so you have it, an example of a strategy card. So you have kind of an ops value in the right, but it's not for ops. So don't be confused by that. That is used for runs.
Yeah, so in an S card, you commit cards to it with a run. So you'd have a 1, 2, 3, 4 card. Mm-hmm. You're going to get a lot of red commitment cubes out of it.
Yeah.
For a V card, the numbers. Oh, it was this one here. Oh, that's an A card. For a V card, you commit to those by having the same number. So you want a whatever you would call it, a Yahtzee.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I want 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and then the A cards, the accommodation ones. You want them by color. So you want all the white cards and you just ignore the letters on them.
Yeah.
So I like how those they're committed to differently.
Yep.
And again, that's why you want lots of players with lots of different types of
then
projects.
they can help you.
Your cards are way more versatile.
Because we found one time, I had like 5 or 6 white cards on mine. I was struggling to finishing it. And you had,
I had 3
like
white
3
cards
on
as
yours.
well.
That's 8 out of a deck of about 125 cards.
And we couldn't help each other.
We couldn't help each other. And that was challenging. But if we had 2 other players, they might have had a white card that it could have helped us.
Yeah, and then when I got that finished and had the S card, and I was then going for sequential orders, so like, oh, sweet, I've got a 1, I can give you a 1.
The other thing that I thought was cool about the strategy cards was some of them had a star on them. And I saw a couple of events that you could literally play an event from the discard if it had a star on it. And I was looking at some of those, man, that would have been really valuable to dig through that discard and find that card and be like, oh, I'm going to use that one because that's really going to do something.
And I'm going to get a freedom marker for it.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot
I think.
Yeah, you think. What's a freedom marker?
It doesn't say.
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of cool. These are multi-use cards. I think. I mean,
no, they are, and again, not in like a wargamey way,
right?
Where it's like ops and events. Like, yeah, there's events on them, but it's more set-based stuff.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
So I feel bad that we kind of went off on the deep end a little bit at the first. Felt like I was a little overly negative.
Whilst that's true, we spent a long time trying to learn this game.
We did.
And the advice to you is hopefully print off those living rules, and you'll probably have a good time with this.
Right.
Because the game itself has some really cool stuff, and play it with as many players as you can get together.
And I don't think there's a question that this is an interesting game. You just need to find it a little bit.
Yes.
You need to better understand the rules, find the living rules, ask some questions. I would hope the designers get on there and answer some more of those questions. I saw several that weren't answered. And this game's only a month old. There should be more answers because people want to play it.
Yeah,
they really do.
Having played this, the next play would be significantly better as well.
I would have
from
chosen
a decision-making standpoint.
I would have chosen a different faction. I would have chosen leaders more appropriately. I would have chosen projects more appropriately. And
so you're going to get all of that as well. But
Yeah.
again, it's a game that rewards coming back to a few times from a strategic standpoint. And the more you play, the more you'll see different projects and different cards. Because there's a lot of cards in this. We got through half the strategic deck. I mean,
well, and it was interesting too. The legislation, it literally said draw 6 random out of like 40.
yeah.
So each game's going to be different, and that's cool. you want some replayability. The game's going to be different. I think that's baked in here.
Yeah, I'd like to get the new rules, get 4 or 5 people together, play the campaign game. I think that would be fun.
And it says on the box, I think it's 60 to 90 minutes. I don't know. Maybe.
We played our little 2-player learning game, and it was about
2 hours.
About 2 hours. But again,
we won.
That was the struggle.
You won. I should say you won.
I won.
You won single-handedly. I was like the idiot leader over there trying to figure out what they were doing. Anyway, I'm glad I bought the game. Yes. I think these kind of games are very interesting and unique.
Yes.
And seriously have a nice niche in our hobby. And
also maybe some play aids.
Play aids are always a good.
This is a back of the rules play aid, and it's like. Okay.
And how many times do we with 6 players back of the rule play aid? I guess I can make 6 copies.
Yeah, but
I shouldn't have to.
You pay $65.
Yeah,
you got to print out the rules, and you got to print out the play aids.
Yep.
So
anyway,
just know that.
I'd play this game again.
I would.
make
under
sure
the right circumstances.
4 or 5 players, but I would definitely play it again. And that should tell you something, that we had some negativity about it, but we would still play it.
Yes, because there's a lot of games that would be in this state, and I would say absolutely not.
Well, and there's several games that we have played.
And you don't hear about a lot of those.
You don't hear about
those.
We don't
waste our time with it.
Because we throw them in the trash can and we kind of move on.
Yeah, but
we don't do throwing in the trash can on screen. That's not what we do.
But this is like, oh man, I really liked playing what we did, but it needs more people, and it needs a much tighter rule
Just a
book.
lot of polishing. And making games is hard. I can't even imagine.
Absolutely.
Making games is hard. Publishing games is difficult. And this is a new company, Dietz Foundation. I think they've done...
This is their four
or five games. And I think they're learning and growing, and I'm sure the next couple of games are going to be hopefully improved and better. And
like Revolution in Iran, really good.
It was a really good game.
Really liked that game.
The stickers on that one had some problems.
Yeah, but the rulebook was fine.
Once I got through the stickers, we had a great time with that game. Yes. Really enjoyed that. And it was a solid game. So anyway, I think this is a solid game. It just needs to be polished a little bit.
Yes.
A second edition rules on this would be...
Yeah, we'll check out the living rules. I'm probably going to read those tonight just for my curiosity,
for fun.
just to see. But anyway, free at last from the Dietz Foundation. Check this out if there's something you might want to have as a project. But yeah, I hope we do get to this at some point with the right...
We'll take this to
with
a
everything squared away.
We'll take this to a con, maybe at WBC. My guess is Dan will sit down with us, right?
Yeah.
Alex, we met this year. Can't remember his last name.
That's the other nice thing about this is it's not a war game. So
no.
you can play this with a lot of people who would not be interested in your war games as well.
So this has a lot of...
And you need people.
Yeah.
So
this has a lot of kind of your traditional Euro-style board game mechanics. If you're used to playing card games, I mean...
There's some like set building. There's
it feels similar.
And you know...
Not a war game.
It's cooperative. You're all playing on the side of positivity. Yeah. And that's a nice part of that as well.
Custom dice were cool. I will say that. So,
absolutely,
nice work
absolutely
on those.
Brutal though. Roll ones all the time.
Oh my gosh! Well, and then the white ones rolled 3s and 4s all the time, and
awful.
The blue has a 4 on it. It was like, oh my goodness.
We were rolling X's and those are 5s because we were doing very poorly. Anyway, free at last from the Dietz Foundation.
But we still won.
Yes,
I want to point that out. We
miraculously
won. You won. Sorry.
Check it out if this is something you'd be interested in. Appreciate you very much for tuning in. I'm Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.